Chapter 1. Snowfall and Secrets. Snow was gently falling at the intersection of Halstead and West 68th around 1 in the morning, a time and place that whispered caution to any soul brave enough to tread its pavements. Particularly unsafe for a solitary figure, like the tall, broad-shouldered white man, clad in a luxurious deep blue Armani coat. He stood serenely under the lone functioning, though flickering streetlight amidst a 5-block radius, his presence almost blending into the night. Standing devoid of hat, gloves or scarf despite the harsh January wind swirling snow around him. Curiously, no snowflake clung to him, as if repelled by an invisible barrier. His demeanor was one of unperturbed calm, seemingly immune to both the chill and the lurking threats. For 3 consecutive days, Chicago's snow had been his backdrop, yet each lead he pursued had fizzled into nothing. Tonight could mark a pivotal change in his fortunes. He observed that the black SUV and step truck had been parked down the block for an unusually long time, yet no one had emerged from either vehicle. The stillness of the scene was eerie, heightening his sense of anticipation. A sense of déjà vu crept over him. He felt he was walking into a trap yet again. However, desperation left him no alternative. He was in dire need of evidence connecting the Joi Boyz with the new order. The Goonies, who once held dominion over Englewood, harbored an intense loathing for the Joi Boyz, especially as the latter encroached further into their territory over the past few months. Rumors circulated that Alpha D, the Goonies' leader, was at the end of his patience. The time had come for a decisive strategy. At the core of Chicago's South Side, nestled within the grid of aging streets, is Englewood, a neighborhood that once pulsed with vitality and economic activity. Now, it languishes under the heavy weight of crime, gang dominance, and an absence of law enforcement. The avenues, previously vibrant with the hum of community life, now echo with silence, their facades crumbling under the relentless march of neglect. This once-celebrated enclave has dimmed, its residents grappling with the pervasive gloom of violence and despair that threatens to erase its legacy. Englewood's social fabric has unraveled due to rampant gang warfare and a thriving drug economy, dividing the area into contested zones. This violence has led to numerous casualties, devastating the community and impacting innocent bystanders. The minimal police presence has exacerbated the situation, leaving residents to fend for themselves amidst chaos. As a result, local businesses have shut down, and many have fled, leaving behind a landscape of desolation with empty buildings and overgrown lots. Those who remain live in fear, with little hope or opportunity for improvement. It was an ironic twist that in Miami, where the tall man lived, gun ownership was twice as common, the firearms largely remained with law-abiding citizens. Here in Chicago, after 50 years of one-party rule, the narrative was flipped. The guns were predominantly in the hands of criminals. The irony didn't escape anyone, especially not after the FBI had mysteriously ceased tracking such statistics. In the pre-dawn chill of a snowy morning, Alpha D, a towering figure of African and French heritage, idles in his black Escalade SUV, the engines hum a lone note in the quietude. As the leader of Chicago's notorious Goonies, he's intimately familiar with the perils and intricacies of his life's chosen course. The enveloping darkness and the soft shroud of snow lend an air of solitude, as though the world itself waits in anticipation. His mind wanders through the corridors of time, reflecting on the decisions that shaped his path, contemplating a future as unpredictable as the slick, icy roads before him. Darius Etienne d'Aberville, later known as Alpha D, entered the world in a French hospital, his birth blessed by the wealth of his mother, Marlene Gaëtan d'Aberville. His father, Ajani Busan, a humble merchant marine from Ghana, shared a love that defied the disapproval of Marlene's affluent family. They sought refuge in America, carrying with them dreams and a hidden fortune, only to meet tragedy on their first Chicago night, brutally murdered for their belongings. Orphaned, Darius, deemed too African for his French kin to take in, found himself in foster care. By the tender age of 12, he had already taken a life, setting him on a path not of patience, but of fierce brutality. Drifting through smaller gangs, his reputation for ruthlessness grew until he found his place within the Goonies. In a swift ascent, he became their leader, his rise marked by the fall of his adversaries. Just down the street from where the tall man stood, illuminated by a single street lamp, Alpha D lounged in the shadowy confines of a black Escalade. Tailing this vehicle was a former delivery truck, now transformed with a rough coat of black paint that barely concealed its past allegiance to a major shipping corporation, only hinting at the original logo with its ghosted letters. In the Escalade, Alpha D and 3 others sat, while an additional 6 gang members were crammed into the truck, a collective force bristling with firearms. Alpha D, in a moment of calm, finished his joint, the smoke curling into the night air as he flicked the remnant outside with a subtle motion through the cracked window. The tall man exhaled a long, patient breath, the wait at an end. For nearly 2 hours, he had stood sentinel. He had observed the men from the moment they arrived, over an hour prior, allowing them the illusion of dominance. Their control, however, was an illusion. He harbored no affection for the notion of striking deals with thugs and gangsters, yet here he was, driven by necessity. The information he sought was on a threat far more perilous than those he now consorted with. In the murky underworld where alliances were as fluid as morals, he had to navigate carefully. His disdain for this company was palpable, but the urgency of his mission left him little choice. With the casual discard of the joint, the night erupted. Engines roared to life, headlights pierced the darkness, and the vehicles charged down the street, converging on the corner where he stood, unyielding. He remained composed, betraying no hint of concern. Unbeknownst to the approaching force, to those with sight beyond the physical, his fingers danced with fleeting flames, a silent orchestration of power. An invisible barrier enveloped him, a shield woven from an ancient magic, perceptible only to those with the rare gift of soul sight. The Goonies' vehicles screeched to a halt on either side of him, doors flying open as armed figures poured out. The air was thick with the scent of burning rubber and the metallic tang of weaponry. Most of them wielded automatic guns, the kind you'd find in the darker corners of Chicago, a city infamous for its stringent gun control laws, yet perennially among the top for gun-related crimes. Alpha D, the last to emerge, cut an imposing figure. In his hand, he held a gold-plated Desert Eagle, a weapon that, minus the gaudy plating, would have been a collector's item, or perhaps better suited for a museum display. Modern firearms had become utilitarian, mostly 3D printed, lacking the charm or uniqueness of Alpha D's choice. The rest of the gang was less flamboyant, equipped with GRA 14 seconds, the 3D printed guns known for their modularity and ease of modification, perfect for the underground arms market. With 3D printable graphene, enthusiasts and industry players have created graphene firearms, from pistols to rifles, exploiting its strength and lightness. Though mainstream adoption is experimental, gangs like the Goonies are keen to explore this frontier. The scene was tense, the gang forming a semicircle around their target, their weapons a silent testament to the city's underground economy and the failure of its gun policies. One of the thugs, with a snarl of aggression, lunged forward, wielding the butt of his assault rifle in a lethal arc aimed at the enemy's skull. But the adversary was prepared. He dodged with the precision of a combat-trained operative, evading the strike. As the attacker staggered from the momentum, the man countered with a swift, open-handed chop to the ribs, executing a move reminiscent of close-quarters combat training. The crack of fracturing bones was almost audible as the soldier collapsed, gasping for breath, likely suffering from 3 broken ribs and facing the imminent danger of a punctured lung. The Goonies erupted into a cacophony of shouts and threats, proclaiming that the man was as good as dead. Now, let's not be hasty," the man said, his voice calm and steady as he raised his hands in a gesture of peace. "There's no need for this to end badly." With a subtle nod from Alpha D, 3 more of his crew charged forward, their intent to overpower the tall man clear. But the man responded with military precision, his movements a seamless blend of advanced combat techniques, each evasion executed with the sharpness of a seasoned operative. In a sudden tactical shift, he raised his hands, igniting a controlled inferno that engulfed his arms up to the elbows. The flames erupted with a ferocity that not only illuminated the street with a blinding light, but also transformed the icy terrain into a scalding quagmire within a 15-foot radius, the snow hissing as it turned to steam. The heat was overwhelming. The Goonies recoiled, shielding their faces from the scorching wave, their curses and shouts lost amidst the crackling of the flames. "Again, friends, I mean you no harm. But my patience is not infinite. I've come to discuss our common adversary, the Joi Boyz." One of the Goonies, driven by panic, unleashed a barrage from his automatic submachine gun. The bullets met an invisible shield, they ignited and disintegrated, falling harmlessly to the ground well before reaching their target. Alpha D's eyes widened with realization. He was not just dealing with a man, but a witch, a fire witch. He raised a hand, signaling for a ceasefire, and with deliberate care, holstered his ostentatious Desert Eagle. "All right, man, let's talk," Alpha D conceded, gesturing for his crew to ease off their weapons. The man, now with a knowing smile, extinguished the flames with a flick of his wrist. "Then please, let us take a walk. The night is quite pleasant, isn't it?" It was a biting 12 degrees Fahrenheit, the wind chill making it feel like -15. Yet, within a 5-foot radius of the man, the air was balmy, reminiscent of an 82-degree Miami evening. Alpha D stood just at the edge of this bubble of warmth, feeling the stark contrast. "My mother, from my last foster home, used to tell stories about you. Witches. Everyone said she was losing her mind, but there have been whispers, conspiracy theories online and in magazines for years. Never believed them until now," Alpha D said, his voice a mix of skepticism and an emerging wariness. "Please, call me Tiberius. We are going to be friends, you and I, Monsieur d'Aberville." Tiberius's French was colored with a mild southern accent, making the name sound almost whimsical, yet there was an earnestness to it that commanded attention. Alpha D halted, his hand instinctively reaching for his pistol. "How the hell do you know that name?" "I know a great deal about you, or at least my mentor does. He knew your parents, helped them escape to America. He was abroad when the tragedy occurred, dealing with another crisis. Hey man, I don't know what the fuck you want, but this sounds like a threat to me, you motherfucker. And who the fuck is your mentor?" Alpha D's voice rose, his stance tense. No, Monsieur d'Aberville. Alpha D, you misunderstand. I would never threaten you. I need your help with our common foe, the Joi Boyz. As for my mentor, he's gone by many names over the centuries. I'm not sure what he called himself when he assisted your parents, but I know him as Judas." The revelation hung in the air, heavy with implications, as the warmth around Tiberius seemed to pulse with the weight of ancient secrets. "Not exactly a name that screams loyalty," Alpha D muttered, his tone low and skeptical. "That name means nothing to me, nor do any of your words so far," he added, trying to inject menace into his voice. But it came out more like a challenge than a threat. Tiberius, unfazed by Alpha D's attempt at intimidation, responded with the calm of a seasoned diplomat. "I'd like to offer you a sign of good faith." As he spoke, he lifted a briefcase that seemingly had appeared from nowhere. Alpha D was certain it hadn't been there moments before. The case clicked open to reveal stacks of crisp $100 bills. Alpha D's eyes widened slightly. It had to be at least $10,000. "Please accept this as a token of our sincerity, to begin our partnership," Tiberius said, his voice smooth and convincing. Alpha D grabbed the briefcase, his fingers deftly riffling through the bills, checking for authenticity without the need to count them, ensuring they weren't just a facade of wealth hiding counterfeit beneath. "You've got my attention now," Alpha D conceded, his demeanor shifting from defensive to intrigued. "So, how do you want the Goonies to deal with the Joi Boyz? They're not just hopped up on drugs, man. Some of my more superstitious crew whisper they might be demons, they move so fast. And who are you people exactly? Are you all witches?" The tall man replied, "No, we are not all witches. My name is Tiberius, and I am but a humble real estate investor in Florida." Alpha D scoffed. "What the fuck does a real estate salesman from Florida want with the Joi Boyz and the Goonies?" Tiberius explained with a calm, almost detached tone. "We are an interested party. Our focus lies with matters far beyond your transactions. There are forces at work, influencing the world in ways unimaginable to most. The Joi Boyz are pawns in this greater game, currently aligning with another group, the New Order, and we must intervene for the greater good." Alpha D interrupted, curiosity piqued. "Who the fuck is this New Order? Isn't that like some New Age unification church or something?" Tiberius nodded slightly. "Yes, in part. They are religious zealots, embedding themselves within the Vatican's structure for centuries. Does that clarify?" "Fuck no, white boy. That doesn't answer shit," Alpha D retorted, frustration evident in his voice, his skepticism about the whole scenario growing. "To delve into the full history of the shadow world would take far too long, and my plane is scheduled to depart soon," Tiberius said, urgency lacing his tone. He extended a black business card to Alpha D, which bore only a stark white 888 phone number. Over the next hour, Tiberius outlined what was required of Alpha D to let the Joi Boyz feel they were gaining ground. In return, Alpha D would receive $50,000 monthly to ensure their encroachment went unchallenged. When the moment was ripe, Tiberius and his associates would swoop in to dismantle the Joi Boyz' operations in Inglewood. However, they needed detailed intelligence on the Joi Boyz' operations, their leaders' schedules, locations, and most of all, who they meet with. Just as he concluded the meeting, Tiberius's phone chimed with an incoming call. "Yes, dear, we've sealed the deal. I'm on my way back to Miami now. Have you left Los Angeles yet? You're boarding now, good. I'll see you at home. Tiberius signaled his driver, who had been idling discreetly a couple of blocks away. The car quickly maneuvered through the streets, and within minutes, Tiberius was en route to the exclusive private terminals at O'Hare's newly expanded airport. Chapter 2. The Dangerous Flight. Within the hushed luxury of a private commercial jet's cabin, Cheri Straka sat amidst 5 men whose casual attire and demeanor belied their true, menacing nature. The seats were plush, arranged in a layout that allowed for both comfort and subtle surveillance. Each man, while appearing as a tourist, carried an air of danger like a second skin. The first, with a shaved head and a physique that spoke of countless hours in the gym, had a neck tattoo that peeked out from beneath his collar, suggesting a history with gangs. His eyes, sharp and alert, moved with a predatory grace as he scanned the cabin, noting every detail from the emergency exits to the other passengers. Beside him, a man with a scar tracing down his cheek tapped his fingers in an incessant rhythm against the armrest, his gaze icy and calculating, hinting at a mind always strategizing. A third man, his eyes piercing from beneath the shadow of a baseball cap, leaned close to whisper to his companion, a tall, lanky figure whose mustache was thin and whose left eye twitched with nervous energy. Their hushed conversation added an undercurrent of tension to the already charged atmosphere. The last man, stocky with a thick beard, seemed relaxed as he lounged in his seat, but the readiness in his posture suggested he could spring into action at any second. A flight attendant, all professionalism with her crisp uniform, glided through the cabin. Her smile was courteous, but Cheri noticed the slight strain at the corners of her mouth. Beneath her jacket, a glimpse of a concealed weapon hinted at her own preparedness. Her actions were deliberate, her eyes scanning not just for service needs, but for any sign of threat. The interior of the small private jet was a testament to luxury and meticulous design. Rich, dark wood paneling lined the walls, complementing the plush, deep pile carpeting that hushed every step. Each seat in the main cabin was an oasis of comfort, complete with personal entertainment systems and armrests that unfolded into tables for convenience in dining or conducting business. The cabin was thoughtfully segmented into 2 distinct areas, the spacious main seating section and a private enclave at the rear. This secluded space, ideal for discreet meetings or relaxation, featured a lavish sofa and a compact kitchenette, accessible through a door that promised privacy from the rest of the passengers. As the jet executed a gentle bank to the right, it marked the 10th subtle course correction. To the untrained eye or ear, these shifts might have gone unnoticed, but to Cheri Straka, they were as distinct as a billboard. Standing tall with an athletic build, her fiery red hair cascading over a chic blue dress, and her feet snug in red ankle boots, Cheri felt each adjustment. She kept her observations to herself, uncertain if everyone aboard shared the same agenda or was unwittingly caught in this web. The notion of innocent bystanders quickly dissipated in her mind, replaced instead by a burgeoning curiosity about the unfolding intrigue. Cheri couldn't be certain she was the target, as reading people wasn't her forte. She longed for Tiberius's presence. He'd have opted for a more direct confrontation. Alone now, she dared not alert the conspirators, fearing they might jeopardize the safety of everyone on board. So she continued to immerse herself in her book, Is Reality Optional? By Thomas Sowell, while her senses remained attuned to the subtle shifts within the cabin. As the plane began its descent, the pilot announced their approach to Miami International Airport, explaining they'd be circling to come in over the Atlantic, thus minimizing land visibility. While not highly unusual, Cheri detected a tremor of unease in the pilot's voice through the intercom. She stole a glance out the window. The expected Florida coastline was conspicuously absent. In her peripheral vision, something caught her attention: mountains, an anomaly in Florida. Quickly calculating the flight's duration and the altered course, she deduced they were likely approaching Sangster International Airport in Jamaica. She kept her gaze fixed on her book, maintaining the charade. The plane landed and taxied towards a private hangar, a regular occurrence for such flights. As they neared, an odd smell infiltrated the cabin, gas mixing with the conditioned air. Cheri closed her eyes, recalling her training in resistance techniques. After a moment, she allowed her body to go limp, simulating unconsciousness. She sensed someone checking her pulse, which she had deliberately lowered, followed by a gentle shake. There was no response from her. Her seatbelt was unbuckled, and she was lifted from her seat, carried out of the plane. The height of the transfer suggested she was being placed into an SUV, Her wrists and ankles were then bound with zip ties, indicating her captors were professionals, 4 on each limb, a gesture that might have been meant as a sign of respect or simply precaution. As the vehicle began its journey, the rhythmic lilt of Jamaican patois filled the air. Cheri, familiar with the dialect from past visits to the island, was able to piece together some of the conversation. They were headed to a plantation in the mountains, roughly an hour away, though the exact location was hard to pinpoint. Her captors seemed confident that the gas would keep her sedated for another few hours. Cheri realized her opportunity for escape was now, before they reached their destination. Yet, her curiosity about the identity of her abductors pressed her to delay any action. She was pondering her next move when her phone rang within her purse. They had overlooked removing the battery, a significant oversight. Tiberius was calling, not out of concern for her safety. He knew she was adept at handling herself, but to signal his intention to intervene. The ringing ceased after only 3 chimes. Her captors, realizing their error, began to argue among themselves, hastily grabbing her purse, rolling down the window, and tossing the phone out into the night. But it was already too late. Cheri was certain Tiberius would soon arrive in Jamaica. She now had to decide whether to make her move to meet him at the airport, or to let him come. To her, the use of multiple zip ties suggested they were cautious, but the phone blunder indicated a level of amateurism. She doubted her captors held significant intelligence, so she opted to see where this journey would lead, hoping to gather more information, or perhaps await Tiberius's inevitable arrival. Cheri mentally eliminated the Joi Boyz from her list of suspects. They lacked the finesse to employ local talent for such an operation. However, both the New Order and Darkling remained viable culprits. Over the past couple of years, she and Tiberius had been strategically expanding their influence worldwide, which had inadvertently made them targets for several powerful factions interested in neutralizing their impact. While there were numerous smaller groups that might wish them harm, she doubted any would possess the means to hijack a private commercial flight and redirect it internationally. This had to be the work of one of the major players. The journey continued without incident. The vehicle, likely an SUV given its spaciousness, provided a level of comfort that almost belied the gravity of her situation. To keep her captors guessing, Cheri would occasionally twitch or shift in her seat, feigning the natural movements of someone unconscious. As the vehicle decelerated, Cheri allowed her eyes to part slightly. Through her lashes, she glimpsed what must have once been a magnificent plantation estate, perched on a mountain. Its vast grounds and grand architecture spoke of a bygone era of opulence and ambition. Now, however, the estate was a shadow of its former self, with buildings succumbing to decay, the grandeur overtaken by neglect, and the relentless advance of nature reclaiming the land. The central edifice of the estate, a once magnificent blend of colonial grandeur and Caribbean flair, now languished in faded splendor. The walls, which had once been a pristine white, were now mottled with stains and weathered by time, the paint peeling to expose the rough grey stone underneath. The grand portico, adorned with what were once elegant columns and intricate carvings, now leaned precariously, its once stately columns cracked, the roof sagging like an old man's shoulders under the burden of age. The estate's extensive gardens, once a showcase of meticulous landscaping, had surrendered to the wild. Lawns that were once meticulously trimmed were now a sea of tall grass and weeds, while flower beds had become tangles of brambles and invasive plants. The fountains, which had once danced with water, stood silent and broken, their stone basins cracked, the patina of age covering what used to be smooth, polished surfaces. The ancillary buildings, which had once been bustling with the activity of the estate's operations, now stood in various stages of decay. The stables, where fine horses were once groomed and carriages polished to a shine, were dilapidated. Doors swung loosely on their hinges and roofs had caved in, leaving the interiors exposed to the elements. Similarly, the barns and sheds that had stored the tools of the plantation's labor force were now in ruins, their walls crumbling, and their structures succumbing to the relentless advance of time and neglect. Despite the evident neglect, signs of recent human activity punctuate the estate's decay. Tire tracks weave through the overgrowth, cigarette butts litter the ground, and empty bullet casings glint in the sunlight, all evidence that the place is far from forsaken. The windows of the main house, though mostly boarded, show marks where boards have been tampered with, suggesting that the estate serves some current purpose. It's apparent that this once grand plantation has been repurposed by an armed group, utilizing its secluded, dilapidated structures as a strategic base. The estate, now a husk of its former splendor, stands as a poignant testament to the ephemerality of grandeur, its current state a stark contrast to the ambition that built it. The crucial question remains, which group now claims this historical relic as their stronghold? Chapter 3. The Library of Flames. After Cheri briefly surveyed her surroundings, she resumed her pretense of unconsciousness. The driver conversed with another man at the estate's gate, whom Cheri had briefly observed before shutting her eyes. He was undoubtedly local, his appearance rugged and unrefined, wearing a mix of faded military gear and civilian clothes, an actual Russian-made AK-47 slung casually over his shoulder. His weathered features and the choice of weapon spoke of a life accustomed to both the harshness of the terrain and the necessity for vigilance. The guards were a diverse group, blending the distinct physical and cultural characteristics of both Jamaican gang members and Eastern European mercenaries. The Jamaican guards were typically tall, with athletic builds honed from years of physical activity. Their skin ranged from dark brown to lighter shades, reflecting the island's diverse heritage. Many sported dreadlocks or closely cropped hair, and their attire often included baggy clothes, bright colors, or traditional Rasta-inspired patterns. Their faces might bear tattoos or scars, symbols of status or survival within the gang hierarchy. Their demeanor was often relaxed yet alert, with a rhythmic, almost dance-like movement in their steps, suggesting both a readiness for action and a deep connection to their cultural roots. On the other hand, the Eastern European mercenaries presented a stark contrast. They were generally of medium to tall height with a more uniform muscular build, often the result of rigorous military or paramilitary training. Their complexions varied but were mostly fair to olive, with hair, colors ranging from blonde to dark brown, often cut short or shaved for practicality. Their clothing was more tactical, favoring dark, muted colors like black or khaki, with utility vests, boots, and sometimes protective gear. These men carried themselves with a stern, disciplined posture, their eyes scanning their surroundings with a methodical, almost mechanical precision, reflecting their training in combat and surveillance. Together, this mix of guards created an eclectic security force, where the laid-back yet vigilant Jamaican style met the disciplined, strategic approach of the Eastern Europeans, forming a formidable and unpredictable defense. After the exchange, the guard retreated to a small gatehouse, and the entrance swung open. The vehicle proceeded inward until the light dimmed, suggesting they had entered a garage or barn. Moments later, the car door opened. Cheri let herself be hoisted out, one of her captors taking the opportunity to inappropriately touch her. Amateurs, she thought. They carried her up a flight of stairs and through several doorways, finally setting her down on a sofa. "Miss Straka, it's truly an honor to meet you in person. You can cease the act now." Cheri opened her eyes and sat up, taking in the room. The library was a masterpiece of opulence and intellectual pursuit. Mahogany bookshelves stretched from floor to ceiling, each volume placed with precision, suggesting a reverence for knowledge. A large, intricately carved wooden table sat in the center, graced with a hand-painted globe, dazzling in its detail and color. Around her, 5 guards, their European heritage evident, stood watch. Their heads were shaved, marked by a distinctive black cross tattoo extending from their foreheads to the nape of their necks. They wore long coats, each man armed with a submachine gun, a silver cross with a concealed blade hanging around their necks. Abramo Spadaccini, the leader, was a man of undeniable authority, his presence filling the room like an unspoken command. He was of medium build, with jet black hair neatly combed back, and his glasses framed sharp, calculating eyes. His tailored suit spoke of both affluence and influence, the fabric impeccable, hinting at a man who was no stranger to the corridors of power. There was no visible weapon on him, yet his demeanor suggested he was the most dangerous person in the room. The library where they met was a sanctuary of class and secrecy, adorned with luxurious leather seating that invited one to sink into thoughtful contemplation. A fireplace crackled gently, casting a warm glow across the room, filling the air with the comforting scent of aged leather and the musty aroma of old, leather-bound books. Despite the presence of armed men, the atmosphere was one of intellectual refuge, a stark contrast to the undercurrent of tension. "I am Abramo Spadaccini, your host for this meeting." He introduced himself with a voice that was both smooth and authoritative. "Abramo Spadaccini," Cheri echoed, her tone laced with recognition. "You're an attaché to the President of the Italian Constitutional Court. Thank you for recognizing me." "Few do, which is by design," he responded, his eyes narrowing slightly. a small acknowledgement of her knowledge in this game of cat and mouse. Cheri, with an act of will, summoned her latent power, her hands still bound by zip ties behind her back. She generated a gentle, yet intense heat, causing the zip ties to soften and begin to break down under her magical influence. She kept her movements subtle, her hands resting on the sofa, her actions hidden from the vigilant eyes of her captors. "So, what's a little weasel like you doing mixed up with the new order, Abramo? I can call you Abramo, can't I?" She taunted, deliberately mispronouncing his name to underscore her disdain. Abramo maintained his composure, his face an unreadable mask. "Miss Straka, your partner and yourself have come to our attention due to your, shall we say, activities over the past few years. They must cease. We both know there's a greater threat at play, one that endangers us all. We should be collaborating," Abramo continued. Cheri let out a chuckle, her eyes glinting with amusement and challenge. "You do realize your ancestors burned mine at the stake, right? Why should we trust or align with zealots bent on global domination under some new unified Christian banner? How is the world any better under you than under the Darklings? From our perspective, you're both doing the same thing, seizing control of governments and corporations, puppeteering from the shadows." Her words were a direct challenge, questioning the morality and the motives of the man who sat before her in this den of luxury and deceit. She continued, "What's the difference between a Darkling-possessed Wilhelm Fence using the Fence Foundation to buy up farmland while funding questionable vaccines, and a New Order zealot running Blackstone Group, acquiring stocks and real estate to manipulate markets and policies? Both scenarios paint a picture of control and corruption, whether the strings are pulled by human hands or supernatural forces. Evil is evil, be it human or inhuman in its source. Yes, Miss Straka, that may seem like the case from a limited perspective," Abramo retorted sharply, his tone dripping with disdain. "But at least we are human." His words hung in the air, a stark reminder of the divide between them. He then turned towards the door, his back to her as he dismissed her argument. "Take Miss Straka to her room. Ensure she stays there," he commanded the guards, his voice cold and authoritative, leaving no room for negotiation. Cheri's patience with his dismissive tone and sheer arrogance snapped. She concluded she had gleaned all she could from Abramo, recognizing him as nothing more than a cog in a vast corrupt machine, unlikely to yield any further insights useful to her or Tiberius. With a mocking, saccharine smile, she deliberately mispronounced his name again. "Well, Abramo, this has been quite enlightening, and I've been eager to revisit Jamaica, but I have other engagements to grace with my presence." As the last word dripped from her lips, an intense wave of heat burst forth from her, the air shimmering with malice as both guards and Abramo were sent sprawling to the ground, their expressions contorted with shock and pain under Cheri's contemptuous gaze. Abramo, dazed and staring upwards, saw Cheri now wreathed in a terrifying aura, a halo of white-hot energy that seemed to consume the very air around her. Her fists were encased in living flames, sending dancing shadows across the walls, transforming the room into a cavern of light and darkness. His eyes widened in sheer horror as he beheld Cheri's eyes, once a calming, vibrant blue. They now seethed with the intensity of molten lava, a stark display of her unleashed power. The shock of this transformation etched itself into Abramo's features, his mouth agape, his face drained of color, reflecting the terror of witnessing something both beautiful and utterly terrifying. "Quick, kill her," Abramo managed to shout, his voice hoarse from the heat and shock. The guards, shaking off their initial shock, scrambled to react with a mix of panic and determination. Some staggered to their feet, their movements clumsy as they tried to regain their balance, while others, still prone on the floor, fought to steady their aim with shaking hands. But their efforts were futile. The two guards who managed to discharge their weapons watched in disbelief as their bullets turned to shimmering bursts of light, disintegrating just inches from Cheri's blazing shield. The energy of her magic rendering conventional weapons obsolete. Cheri's focus shifted, her gaze locking onto the scrambling figures of the guards. With a fierce, almost ritualistic thrust of her hands, she released a torrent of white-hot flames that surged across the room with the fury of an avenging deity. The fire swept through like a divine judgment, its heat so intense that it not only incinerated the men, but also devoured the library's precious contents. Bookshelves turned into pillars of fire, pages fluttered briefly like moths before turning to ash, and the once grand library was transformed into a charnel house of light and destruction in mere seconds. Abramo, driven by sheer survival instinct, had managed to roll behind the heavy mahogany desk, the only barrier substantial enough to offer some protection from the inferno. Just as the flames licked at the edges of his refuge, he felt the searing heat, but the desk absorbed much of the blast. Emerging from his makeshift shelter, he was a vision of horror. His suit now clung to him in blackened, smouldering strips, his skin blistered and charred, the smell of burnt flesh mingling with the scent of scorched wood and paper. His face, a mask of pain and terror, reflected the true cost of crossing paths with Cheri's unleashed wrath. Cheri approached him with an almost spectral grace, her steps more like a glide than a walk, her presence radiating an otherworldly calm amidst the chaos. Standing over the defeated and broken form of Abramo, she looked down with an expression that mingled contemplation with the cold assessment of a judge. Memories of her mentor Judas's teachings on the necessity of control, coupled with the imagined frown of disapproval from Tiberius, tempered her rage, guiding her from vengeance to mercy. "You'll live this time, Abramo," she declared, her voice carrying the serene yet ominous tone of the calm before a storm. "Thanks to the voices of my better angels." Her words, though soft, cut through the air like a blade. "But make no mistake," she continued, her eyes flaring with a warning light, "if you or your group come after us again, no angels, no prayers will save you." With her decree laid down, she turned away, leaving Abramo to his fate, her departure marked by the lingering, smouldering prints of her fiery footsteps. As she moved, the flames seemed to dance in her wake, a reminder of the power she held and the mercy she had chosen to show. As Cheri advanced towards the staircase, the air crackled with tension and the scent of imminent battle. The guards, a motley crew of Jamaican gang members and Eastern European mercenaries, materialized from the shadows. The Jamaicans, with their agile, street-smart movements, were quick to react, their bright, baggy clothes a stark contrast to the grim task ahead. The Eastern Europeans, with their disciplined, tactical approach, took positions with practiced ease, their dark gear blending into the gloom. As they opened fire, the sound of automatic weapons echoed through the grand hall, bullets whizzing past Cheri like angry hornets. Cheri, however, was no ordinary adversary. With a mixture of rage and resolve, she channeled her powers, her hands igniting with a fiery glow. The fire magic she wielded was not just for show, it was a force of destruction. As the guards aimed their weapons at her, she countered with blasts of flame. Each burst of fire from her palms was a counterpoint to the staccato rhythm of gunfire, the flames dancing wildly as they sought their targets. The air around her shimmered with heat, the light of her magic casting eerie shadows across the ornate walls of the staircase. The battle was fierce. Each step Cheri took down the grand staircase marked by the clash of elements. The Jamaican guards, with their dreadlocked heads and vibrant attire, dodged and weaved, attempting to outmaneuver the fire. Yet, those caught in Cheri's path were engulfed in flames, their cries mingling with the sound of gunfire. The Eastern Europeans, with their stoic expressions and tactical vests, tried to maintain formation, firing in controlled bursts to suppress Cheri's advance. But their bullets were no match for the inferno she unleashed, their steel melting, their resolve wavering under the onslaught of her magic. The once opulent estate, with its marble floors and high ceilings, became a battlefield. The hiss of flame and the sharp report of automatic weapons filled the space, creating a symphony of chaos. Cheri's path to the garage was marked by the aftermath of her confrontations. Scorch marks marred the pristine carpet, and the smell of burnt fabric and flesh permeated the air. Each guard that stood in her way became part of the tapestry of destruction, their bodies either smoldering or riddled with bullet holes from their comrades' crossfire in the confusion. As the last guard fell, an oppressive silence descended, broken only by the crackle of fading flames and the fading echoes of gunfire. Cheri's descent down the staircase had painted a vivid, undeniable message across the opulent walls. No force, neither of man nor machine, could withstand her when she unleashed her raw power and mastery over fire. Her adversaries now lay vanquished, their bodies scattered like fallen leaves, the path to her destination finally clear. Behind her, she left a tableau of devastation, a scene so profound in its destruction that it would be recounted in hushed tones, becoming a dark legend in the estate's storied history. Chapter 4. Reunited. The air was thick with the scent of eucalyptus mingled with the sweet, earthy undertones of night-blooming flowers as Cheri Straka navigated the stolen SUV down the Serpentine Mountain Road. The vehicle, a sturdy black Range Rover, was more than just a means of escape from the estate. It was a symbol of her victory, its engine purring with the same sense of liberation that now coursed through her veins. Above, the night sky was a canvas of deep indigo, dotted with stars that seemed to wink in acknowledgement of her freedom. The moon cast a silver glow, providing just enough light to discern the twists and turns of the road, which clung to the mountain's contours like a lover's embrace. Each bend brought with it the awareness of the steep drop to her left, a silent reminder of how close she'd come to disaster, both at the estate and on this perilous escape. Inside the SUV, the atmosphere was a stark contrast to the cool, fresh air outside. The dashboard lights bathed Cheri's face in an eerie blue glow, her eyes sharp and focused on the road ahead, her hands firm on the wheel, betraying none of the turmoil within. The interior was littered with the remnants of her captivity, zip ties strewn about, small piles of ash from her fiery escape, and the faint smell of smoke that clung to the upholstery, a testament not only to her power, but to the fierce battle she had just endured. Her blonde hair, pulled back into a tight ponytail, framed a face set in concentration, the only evidence of her ordeal being the smudge of soot on her cheek, like a badge of honor from the warriors of old. As she descended, the landscape shifted from the wild, untamed jungle to more orderly fields, where the occasional silhouette of grazing animals could be seen under the moonlight. The road smoothed out, allowing her to increase her speed, the headlights slicing through the darkness, revealing farmhouses with lights still on, signs of life stirring even in the depths of night. A dog's bark echoed, a motorcycle's headlight flashed by, and with each sign of civilization, the tension of potential pursuit crept into her mind. Her thoughts, however, were not solely on the road ahead, but also on the battle at the mansion, a cacophony of gunfire and flame, the clash of cultures and motives. She replayed the battle in her mind, the mix of Jamaican gang members with their vibrant, almost festive attire, and the Eastern European mercenaries with their disciplined, tactical approach. She had seen the fear in their eyes as her flames danced, not just with the power to destroy, but with the intent to assert her will. Each guard she had encountered was a piece of a puzzle, part of a larger game where she was both player and pawn. The use of her fire magic had been a necessary unleashing, a reminder of the raw power she wielded, but also of the control she must maintain. She questioned the morality of her actions, the lives taken in the name of survival, the ethics of using such force when it was life or death. Had she become what she fought against, or was this the cost of safeguarding the future? The airport drew closer, and with it, Cheri's senses sharpened to a razor's edge. She navigated through the outskirts of Montego Bay, the streetlights painting the night in streaks of yellow and white, like stars fallen to earth. The rhythmic hum of the SUV's tires on the asphalt was punctuated by distant reggae beats, a melody of freedom that seemed to resonate with her spirit. The suburban areas were alive with muted activity, windows open, laughter and conversation drifting out, a stark contrast to the silence she had left behind in the mansion's aftermath. She was vigilant, her mind racing through the tactical scenarios, her eyes scanning for any sign of danger or pursuit. The imposing silhouette of Sangster International Airport emerged against the horizon, its lights a beacon not just of safety but of transition, a promise of a new chapter, or perhaps a continuation of the old one. Cheri slowed her approach, her heartbeat sinking with the cautious speed of the vehicle. The airport was quiet, with only the night shift staff moving like silhouettes among the bright security lights. The occasional traveler, a lone figure in the vast expanse of the terminal. She scanned her surroundings with the intensity of a hunter, always ready for the unexpected. The sound of airport machinery, the distant chatter of passengers, and her engine's hum formed a symphony that marked her escape. Pulling into the short-term parking lot, Cheri cut the engine, the silence that followed amplifying her heartbeat. She took a moment to gather her breath, ensuring she had all she needed from the vehicle. With a deep breath, she stepped out, the night air enveloping her like a cloak, blending her into the shadows. Her movements were purposeful, each step calculated, leaving the SUV behind as a silent testament to her escape, a chapter closed but never forgotten, the introspection of the battle still burning in her mind like the flames she had conjured. In the air somewhere over Georgia, Tiberius leaned back into the plush leather seat of the Gulfstream G200, feeling the vibration of the engines resonate through the airframe. His deep blue Armani coat, luxurious yet functional, draped over his frame, accentuating his wiry build and the broadness of his shoulders. His steely blue eyes, usually sharp with intelligence, now showed traces of fatigue. From his recent endeavors, his medium brown hair, neatly combed, had a few rebellious strands falling forward. hinting at the stress of recent events. The coat was not just a garment but an emblem of his readiness, his commitment to the cause, and his connection to Cheri. Dec, the pilot, an old friend from Tiberius's marine days, was at the controls. His voice crackled through the intercom, light and teasing. "Hey, Tib, this trip to Chicago, was it anything like that time in Kandahar when we had to dodge more than just sandstorms?" Tiberius chuckled, the memory a brief escape from his current concerns. "Only if Chicago started shooting at us, Dec," he replied, his voice filled with a mix of humor and relief, grateful for the camaraderie that could lighten the heaviest of burdens. The levity was short-lived as Tiberius pulled out his phone, a device far beyond the ordinary, designed for their unique needs. He dialed Cheri's number, expecting her voice, or at least her voicemail. Instead, he heard the fourth ring and instantly knew she was in trouble. Concern etched deeper lines into his face as he navigated to a specialized tracing app. The program whirred to life, searching for any sign of her. The trace returned a result that was anything but reassuring. Cheri's phone was in Jamaica, not Miami where she was supposed to be. His expression darkened, a storm brewing in his eyes. He unbuckled and moved to the cockpit where Dec was enjoying a sip from a flask of rum, another habit from their military days. "Dec, we need to change course to Jamaica now." Cheri's phone is there, and she let it ring more than 3 times. Dec's demeanor shifted to match the urgency of the situation. He set aside the flask, his hands moving with practiced precision over the Gulfstream G200's advanced navigation system. "Jamaica, huh? All right, let's divert." He entered the new coordinates into the Flight Management System, FMS, his fingers deftly navigating through the interface to input the latitude and longitude for Sangster International Airport. Simultaneously, his other hand reached for the aircraft's communication panel, where he toggled the frequency selector to contact air traffic control. "Control, this is Gulfstream Golf 200, requesting a course change to Sangster International. Over." He spoke into the microphone, his voice clear and professional. As he awaited acknowledgement, he adjusted the autopilot, moving the cursor on the multi-function display MFD to select and activate the new route. The plane's flight director indicators on the primary flight display PFD began to adjust, aligning with a new heading. The aircraft responded to the input, the engines slightly changing pitch as the autopilot engaged the turn. Dec monitored the attitude indicator, ensuring the bank wasn't too steep, keeping an eye on the altimeter to maintain their current flight level. He then checked the heading select knob, turning it to match the new bearing, watching as the plane's nose followed suit. "Don't worry, Tib Cheri's like a cat, 9 lives and all," he reassured, his tone carrying the weight of the situation beneath the calm professionalism. "She's strong, powerful, and can take care of herself. Remember Berlin?" While the plane banked, Dec kept a vigilant watch over the instruments, ensuring the airspeed remained constant and the aircraft stayed within the safe parameters, if only, of its flight envelope. He glanced at the navigation display, ND, where the moving map updated, showing their new trajectory towards Jamaica. The aircraft systems hummed with efficiency, the screens glowing with vital information, the digital readouts on the engine indicating and crew alerting system, EICAs, confirming all systems were functioning nominally. During this critical maneuver, Tiberius nodded, the memory of Berlin a comforting touchstone. "Yeah, I remember. But that doesn't mean I won't worry." He returned to his seat, his mind a maelstrom of scenarios, each more troubling than the last. The jet's engines hummed a new tune, the sound a constant reminder of their altered path. He stared out the window, the blue of the sky reflected in his eyes, his thoughts with Cheri, hoping for her safety. "We've got enough fuel, and I'll have us there in no time," Dec called back, his voice resonating with the confidence of someone who had navigated through far trickier skies. He glanced at the fuel gauges on the engine indicating and crew alerting system, EICAs, confirming their reserves would comfortably cover the detour. "Besides, you know Cheri, she's probably making some new friends or burning down the local scene." Tiberius managed a small, wry smile at Dec's attempt at humor, appreciating the levity amidst the tension. "I hope so, Dec, but let's get there fast, just in case her friends are unwelcome ones." The thought of Cheri in danger tightened his gut, yet the humor served as a brief respite from his worries. Dec's laughter filled the cockpit, a sound that was both comforting and reassuring, echoing the trust they had in each other and in Cheri's capabilities. "You and your dramatic flair. Tib, she'll be fine, but we'll be there to make sure of it." His hands moved with the ease of long practice, making precise adjustments to the aircraft's controls. He adjusted the throttle to maintain optimal speed for their new route, ensuring the engines operated at peak efficiency for the flight path ahead. The plane banked gently, its wings slicing through the air with purpose, now committed to the altered course toward Jamaica. The navigation system beeped softly, confirming the new flight plan had been fully integrated. On the multifunction display MFD, the route was displayed with a new direct line to their destination, the digital map updating with each passing second. Tiberius felt a surge of determination pulse through him. He knew Cheri was formidable, her strength and resilience unmatched, but he was also acutely aware of the shadows that might lurk in places like Jamaica, where the line between friend and foe could blur. Dec's words lingered in his mind, mingling with the steady hum of the jet, a constant reminder of their shared history and the battles they had faced together. His coat, more than an emblem of style, was a symbol of his commitment, a cloak of responsibility and readiness to fight for those he held dear. He adjusted the coat's collar, feeling the fabric's weight, a physical manifestation of the burden he bore and the battles he was prepared to wage. With each passing mile, his resolve hardened, his thoughts coalescing into a clear plan for what they might encounter upon their arrival. As the aircraft leveled off, heading southward, Tiberius looked out the window, the blue of the ocean below reflecting the sky above, mirroring the depth of his concern and determination. He was ready for whatever awaited them in Jamaica, knowing that their reunion with Cheri would be both a moment of relief and the start of another chapter in their ongoing saga. In the air over the Caribbean, the Gulfstream G200 began its descent, slicing through the warm Caribbean air with the precision of a blade. The runway lights of Sangster International Airport twinkled like distant stars, guiding Tiberius to Cheri. The jet's engines throttled down, their roar diminishing to a whisper, while the landing gear extended with a mechanical grace, like a dancer preparing for the final move. The plane touched down with a gentle thud, the screech of tires blending harmoniously with the soft, tranquil sounds of the island evening. Tiberius was the first to disembark, his deep blue Armani coat fluttering slightly in the tropical breeze as he stepped onto the tarmac. His stride was purposeful, each step echoing with authority, his face a mask of calm resolve. Instead of presenting his passport, he employed his magic with subtlety, a gentle nudge of his will that instilled trust and familiarity in the customs officers. They nodded, their eyes slightly glazed, allowing him passage without the customary scrutiny. He moved swiftly towards the parking lot, driven by the urgency to reach Cheri's last known location. But as he rounded a corner, his pace faltered. There, stepping out from the driver's side of the black Range Rover, was Cheri Straka. Even in the dim lighting of the parking lot, her beauty was luminous. Her blonde hair caught the glow of the overhead lamps, casting a halo around her head, much like the stars had through the jungle's canopy during her drive. Her athletic frame, a testament to the trials she'd just overcome, did nothing to diminish her allure. To Tiberius, she was not just beautiful, she was a beacon of strength, resilience, and the heart he was sworn to protect. Their eyes locked, and in that moment, Cheri's face transformed, the mask of weary determination melted into an expression of radiant joy, her eyes lighting up with a warmth that could rival the moonlit paths she had navigated earlier. It was the look of someone who had faced peril alone, but now found solace in reunion. The distance between them vanished in a few swift strides, Tiberius's stern demeanor softening as he approached her. Cheri, though formidable and self-sufficient, felt an overwhelming sense of homecoming at the sight of him. Their embrace was intense, filled with the unspoken relief of survival and the deep bond of love. His coat wrapped around them both, offering a shield against the world. Their kiss was a silent dialogue of all they had endured, a mingling of fear, relief, and profound connection. It was long, passionate, conveying more than words ever could. When they parted, Cheri's smile was radiant, infused with both mischief and deep affection. "I knew you'd come," she said, her voice a blend of confidence and heartfelt emotion. Tiberius chuckled, his eyes reflecting her warmth. "I always will," he replied. "But it seems you had everything under control." "Always," she assured him, her hand finding his, their fingers intertwining. "But it's better with you here." He reached up, his touch gentle as he brushed away the smudge of ash from her cheek, his fingers lingering with a tenderness that spoke volumes of his concern. "Care to explain?" he asked, his voice laced with a mix of curiosity and relief. Cheri leaned into his touch for a moment, her eyes twinkling with a hint of the mischief they shared. "Well, let's just say I've been making some artistic statements," she replied, her voice a playful dance around the truth, her smile suggesting a tale too long and perhaps too dangerous for the moment. Hand in hand, they turned to face whatever the future held, their unity a testament to their shared purpose and love. With every step, they moved not just towards the unknown, but towards each other, their connection as clear as the night sky above, promising adventures, challenges, and moments like this, where words were less important than the silent language of their affection,